Well, Hans, all anybody is talking about at this point is basically Joe Biden. What's going on? Is he going to step down? When is he going to step down? What will the Democratic Party be? I mean, effectively, it's Biden death watch 24/7. And, that's kind of where we're at. So with that, maybe we can kind of jump in on what our thoughts are, because I know both you and I have been thinking a lot about this and have some kind of distinct thoughts about where this may be headed. So with that, why don't you go ahead and jump in?
Yeah, no, it is all that anyone's talking about, which I perhaps did not expect to this extent. Now, obviously, he had his train wreck debate, and there was always two options after that. Either they all circled the wagons for him. By all, I mean, media, Democrats, the usual suspects, or they go after him, and it turned out to be the latter. And then the next question was going to be, how long were they going to go after him? And well, it's been more than a week, and it's been like 10 days, and they're still doing it. So very interesting times, absolutely. I would perhaps just start off here with a thought that I posted on Twitter a few days ago, and I had a lot of people, like friends of ours, kind of DM me and text me and kind of offline and say, hey, what do you mean by that? That doesn't make any sense. So what I said was that the Biden implosion is not good for Trump. And I think, in the meantime, I've seen a few people, Dan Bongino and so on, kind of also tweet similar things with a bit of an explanation attached. Obviously, I just put it out as a sentence because it just felt this is not good for Trump, because the way it's going and the fact that the media is going so hard after him and people in his own party, and now he's even complaining about the elites in his own party trying to replace him. And, none of that is good, because if he gets replaced, then things aren't looking as good for Trump as they do right now. If he stays as the nominee and as the candidate, Trump is going to win.
Yeah, maybe I kind of want to first focus on the Biden situation, but just real quick, a lot of the polls in terms that we've seen in terms of the other people that he could go up against, the candidates that are considered viable, doesn't seem honestly to make that much difference. I don't worry so much about that as I do about what is it that the DNC has planned, because they've always got plans. And what I worry about is if the decision has been made for Biden, what's coming at us that we're not expecting. But, going back to Biden for a minute, I think that the decision has been made. Like, that is the operative term. For me, when I first really thought about this was when we saw Carl Bernstein come on CNN and start talking, we're basically trashing Biden. And at that point in my mind, I thought, okay, the intelligence community has made their mind up, and that's why Bernstein is here, that he's doing his job. That got followed up with the interview with Stephanopoulos, who effectively is a Clinton lackey, he's intelligence community connected, and basically destroyed Biden during that interview, allowed Biden to destroy himself. But one of the things that Stephanopoulos was doing was he kept asking follow-up questions of Biden, which is also very destructive and something that we don't see. So, it just seems that the knives are fully out for Biden. And I guess part of me wonders, no matter what happens, once you pull these knives out of the shelf, they don't go back in very easily. I don't think this is something that can be taken back, that everybody's going to rally behind Biden. It's just a matter of time in my mind at this point.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, in a way, it's perhaps, again, it's surprising how many knives have come out and how strongly they've come out. Now, the media may try and walk it back to an extent, but as you say, this isn't going back in the tube. This is not happening. Even if just for one reason, since the media has put out now that they think he's senile, and of course they say they were duped. Anyway, let's leave that aside. Since they've now put out this narrative that he's senile, which of course isn't a narrative, that's the truth, and you and I have been saying it for at least 4 years. I mean, I went back and looked at some of our tweets here from 2019 when he did those debates with the Democrats for the nomination back then. He was cognitively impaired back then, and we were saying it. The only thing that's happened is that it's gotten worse over time. So now that the media has finally put that out there, all that people will be looking for is the next slip up. And obviously there's going to be another slip up. There will be many, many other slip ups. So every time that happens, though, even if the media tries to walk it back, the whole thing will just explode again. and he can't help it. It's impossible. It's, any candidate can reinvent themselves in any way whatsoever. And one of the things that might happen is if Kamala gets it, the media and Kamala, everyone's going to totally reinvent her. Suddenly she's like the best thing on earth, from being a total airhead to like the new hope and change.
We've already seen that narrative developing. There's been a lot of tweets about her being a great orator, which is laughable, but that's what they're going to try to do.
That's right. But this is the one thing that Biden cannot do. He cannot change the narrative. He can't just reinvent himself. None of that's possible because of the essence of the problem. And the essence of the problem is that he's senile. He has dementia of some kind. I'm not going to, try and diagnose him from a distance or whatever. But there's obviously a problem there. There's these constant brain freezes. He can't finish sentences. He keeps slurring his words. He's got this hand thing going on, and you see his kind of stiff hand, especially the left one.
Holding the pen during the interview.
Exactly. To try and sort of conceal that. You cannot undo that. Your candidate is so deeply flawed, fundamentally, inherently, just can't, in a way that cannot be changed. That script cannot be rewritten unless they literally, which I've seen someone put out, like, let's create AI of Biden. Let's put out let's lock the real Biden in a basement and put out AI. So maybe that's the only one way they could save this.
Yeah, it just, in my mind, it kind of doesn't matter. And I was nodding my head vigorously because it's exactly what was running through my head, is that the toothpaste is out of the tube and you can't put it back in. You've got all these headlines from every major media organization. You've got all these sound bites from every powerful DNC official. You've got all of the Biden clips. Like, let's just say hypothetically, somehow magically, Biden started to sound a little bit better. Everybody is still going to be waiting for the next fall and the next, misstep. And you've just got this plethora. The entire media aligned themselves against Biden. That's something that's not easily put back. Oh, we didn't mean it. Oh, we suddenly don't think that he's senile now. Those things aren't going away. They just can't go away. Axelrod was another guy, David Axelrod, who was out there just knifing Biden mercilessly. We mentioned at some point a decision was made, and I guess that's what my mind keeps going back to. Something somewhere changed at a very, very high level, whether it was Obama, other DNC officials, the grouping, the intelligence community behind them. There was a decision that was made to take Biden out, and that's just not going to be reversed. I don't see any way that happens. It feels like, if there was any chance, any possibility of somehow pulling back from the precipice, that was maybe last week, pre the Stephanopoulos interview. We crossed that. It was a disaster. And now, as you said, everybody is simply, it's a death watch to see when is going to be his next major misstep. And his next major misstep is every time that he opens his mouth.
Right, and that's the reason why they decided we have to do this. It's just a question of time. I agree with you. It's simply impossible to rejig this situation. Let's take, just for an example, let's take a counterexample where the media, Democrats and so on, did manage to kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube. Remember back in 2021, the Fauci emails came out, and we did a lot of, exclusives on that in terms of what that meant. And basically what it meant is he covered up the lab leak. And that's also when we knew that the lab leak was 100% confirmed, especially when that diffuse proposal came out. So I don't want to go into all that, but the media did manage to put the toothpaste back in the tube back then. And the way they did it is because that situation was just fundamentally different. And specifically what happened was that they put out these, they got these fraudulent papers put out. There was that, remember that fraudulent seafood market paper? And then there was another study or whatever. And then they were going to say, well, there were Fauci emails and there was these, but it doesn't matter because now there's these new studies and everything's fine now and it was all natural and so on. So there was a path to put it back in the tube. And here, because of the nature of the problem being, what's going on in his head or what's not going on in his head, you just can't do that. And I think they just realized that. And there's no way we can undo this, because after that train wreck of a debate, people are just going to notice this a lot more, because once you know what you're looking for, you see it all the time.
Well, and and it's a fundamental issue. It's not a matter of truth. It's not about resculpting somebody's words or, a released damaging document. Here it's just fundamental breaking of trust on the side of the left. where before they were willing to believe all these narratives. And those narratives, mind you, were in full effect just 2 weeks before. Everybody was portraying what was taking place over at the G7 as, oh, it's just the right-wing hysteria. It's the right-wing media machine. It's the right-wing lies about Biden. And so the media steps up en masse to defend that falsely, because the longer form videos were worse than the short form, but steps up en masse to push that back. And then Biden blows it up at the debate where everybody can see that, oh my God, there's a problem. And frankly, the big subplot to all this is the media doing cartwheels, trying to basically bend over backwards and pretend that they somehow were misled and didn't actually know what kind of bad shape Biden was in. So, from the perspective of the guy on the ground, the actual voter, that's just broken. You can't unsee what you've now seen, and now they've seen it. And I got to think, in the quiet little corners of their mind, they're going back to all the other little clips that they were told was just right-wing propaganda, and wondering, well, okay, that was real. That can't be undone.
No, it cannot be undone. That's correct. So what happens now? We've got a few options. They keep him. They put in Kamala now. They put in Kamala as the candidate. And I don't see any other options. I don't see a third candidate come forward. You just can't do that. You cannot. I see no path whatsoever where they replace both Biden and Kamala with another candidate. That's just not going to happen, because they built up all these narratives about how this is their team. Okay, maybe the old man is now too old and he's gone senile. Well, whoopsie. Well, luckily we have Kamala, right? Her list of DEI is just incredible, right? First this, first that, and she's got the whole palette of DEI going for her. So I just don't see that happening. So I think it's going to be one of those three options.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with that. I still kind of worry about what I don't know, but the larger picture that I'm adopting is, one, it's just almost certainly got to be Kamala absent some sort of real shock. Then also that Biden has to be gone. Maybe we could get into in a minute what happened. What does that mean if Biden says he's not running? Because obviously the next question is what happens with his current presidency. That's probably the lead-in for Kamala. But, we're getting a lot of pushback from folks saying that, well, it can't be done because of state rules and this and that, et cetera. And I think both you and I have really been kind of shaking our heads at that like, okay, look, I'm not the rule expert. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to walk through the rules piece by piece, dissect them, and explain why that's wrong. But I am going to be the guy who's going to tell you all of those rules don't matter a bit. The DNC is going to find a way. Don't hang your hat on those. They're not going to matter. When push comes to shove, if the leadership of the DNC and the intelligence community have decided that they want Biden out and they want somebody new in, most likely Kamala, even though they're not happy with her, they'll settle for Kamala. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen.
100%. And same here. I mean, I have not looked at the nitty gritty of replacing a candidate in Wisconsin or, wherever, Michigan, all these swing states and so on. I don't really care like you, because I know that if they want to make it happen, they will make it happen. And so I think any time spent on discussing all those things is pretty futile. It's really just a tactical decision on their part. What do they do? And I think I agree with you that they've decided Biden has to go. What they haven't decided yet is the timing and the means and the mode and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of where we are now. So in terms of the first option, Biden just stays as a candidate and goes through till November and so on. Yeah, I'd give that less than 10% at this point. So then the only other options are replace him now with Kamala as president and as the candidate, or Biden keeps the presidency until January and Kamala is the candidate. I think it comes down to those two. Between those two, strangely, I think the more likely one is Biden gets to keep the presidency and Kamala as the candidate. I know that's kind of very illogical in terms of if he's too senile to run, then he shouldn't be president, right? That's sort of pretty obvious. But they'll find a way, they'll wiggle through. The media will help them wiggle through and so on. So I'd say that's the most likely option.
Yeah, I guess I might have. I'm a little bit on a different side of that, and I was there, and then I shifted. And one of the things that got me shifted and what I'm shifting to is they just want him out now, period, on both sides. So they don't want him to be a candidate, nor do they want him to maintain the presidency. And the thing that made me think that was Senator Mark Warner, who's, obviously a very, very powerful Democrat, but he's head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So, there's probably nobody who's more plugged into what the intelligence community is doing, what the intelligence community wants. And Warner garnered support with some other senators, set up and was supposed to have a meeting today, with Biden on Monday. And what happens is Biden basically negged that meeting. Now, I believe that Senator Warner said something like, well, I canceled the meeting. I'm not going to meet with him, on Monday. But what was really going on was he wasn't meeting with him because Biden sent out this letter where he's dug in his heels and saying that he's staying no matter what. So Warner realized, okay, forget it. It's not worth it at this point. I'm not doing that. We're moving to the next plan. And so when I looked at that, that was my moment where I thought, okay, they've realized when Warner canceled that meeting that that's the recognition that, all right, gloves are off. We're going to just try and take him out. My personal thought is that there's not an unreasonable chance that something happens this week. Things are moving so quickly, and it just feels like we're moving rapidly towards some sort of a culmination point. I would be surprised if we don't have some sort of answer, at least over the next couple of weeks, as to what happens. It just can't go on like this.
No, it can't. And they can't shut up the media. I think that's probably by design. I mean, by day, I mean the Biden camp is just going on, and the media keeps being fed not only by the Warners, but also by leaks within the Biden administration, which, by the way, he mentioned the leaks Biden did on MSNBC on the breakfast show, that awful breakfast show with Joe and Mika. That was astonishing. He's talking about when does that ever happen? He's criticizing leaks out of his own house. And of course, the media itself, there is an element here of, usually the media are just stenographers. They just do what they're told. But it just so happens that here, what they're told by the intelligence community, by the Warner types, by the leaks within the Biden camp, the matches what the media wants to do for once. And what they want to do here is obviously wash their own hands of their complicity in all of this. So it's sort of a perfect alignment of all these forces, which means that it will go on. And I agree with you, since it will go on, you might as well end it sooner rather than later. The problem, of course, is you got to give the media a bit of time to prepare the sort of the coronation of Kamala, because she's going to be the next best thing. She's going to be hope and change. She's going to be all the things Obama was, but on steroids. She's going to be so fantastic. It was time to change, pass the torch and new generation, all this. They're going to be so shameless at promoting that kind of stuff. So I bet you behind the scenes, those campaigns are in full swing in terms of getting that all sorted out. So yeah, and they're probably just figuring out it's kind of a Goldilocks thing. You can't go too early, because what if you give Kamala the whole 5 months, she's going to mess it up so badly that maybe, that whole scheme will sort of unravel. You can't leave it too late, obviously. So you just have to find exactly the right time.
Yeah, I still wonder, though, you sent out that tweet this morning where you were highlighting that comment that was made on the Morning Joe show. And, we said something, I'm getting so frustrated about the elites in the party who know so much more. And as you rightly put out, I mean, that is an incredible quote. And it's indicating a couple different things. One, it's indicating that decisions are being made by, this power structure of which Biden is no longer a part of. He was part of that power structure. He's not. He's out. And it's also a sense of isolation, in that now it's kind of Biden standing alone. He's elevated Jill, he's elevated Hunter sitting in with the various meetings. And it seems that the Bidens are approaching this from a self-protective manner, that we want to hang on to the presidency with everything that we have because we need it to protect our family. And everybody else has now divided themselves away from that and are saying, we just need you out. On Kamala, it is going to be a little bit difficult because there are so many different things you could bring up. I mean, pretty much every speech she's ever given where she looks like an idiot. And don't forget, there's also the issue of what did Kamala know and when did she know it? I think that has the chance to become something that becomes more powerful, more prevalent going forward. Remember, it was Kamala who was out there, literally gave a press conference and was defending Joe Biden after Robert Hur released the transcript where it was just god awful. Said, I can't prosecute you because you're senile. And she was out there in a press conference saying how he was sharp as ever, sharp as a tack. She interacts with him every day, and he's fantastic, and he's on top of everything. That was 3 months ago.
Yeah, but they can repackage that very easily. That's the media is that's what they're trained to do. Those sorts of things you can always put back in the tube. The whole narrative will be, I think they're just working, but both in terms of the narrative of promoting Kamala, but also the narrative of the old man had this sudden, very, very sudden deterioration. No one knew, no one could have guessed, and so on. And that fits perfectly with Kamala, denying all that back a few months ago. So I think they can mold a perfect narrative to make all this kind of stuff work, and all this. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. And I think that's what's going on right now. And that's where kind of the delay is from. And I think that ties in with the ultimate, how are you going to do it? He's obviously, with the letter that you already mentioned, which, by the way, the letter that he wrote does not mention a word. Well, he didn't write it. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Some speechwriter wrote a letter. It's actually quite eloquent in terms of sentence structure and words. It's quite well written. But of course, there's a dog that didn't bark, and that's the fact that nowhere in the letter does it talk about his health, about his mental state, his capacity, his nothing whatsoever. So the whole reason why the letter was written in the first place is because he's senile, and everyone's seen that he's senile. But the letter doesn't say, like, I'm not senile, or it doesn't even attempt to say anything of that nature, which is, very remarkable given what the letter was written for. So the letter just repeats stuff that every Democrat agrees. Trump is terrible and blah, blah, blah. Well, that has nothing to do with Joe Biden. In fact, he's only making his case worse, because it means, well, if Trump is so terrible, then maybe we shouldn't have you as our candidate. So what they're trying to work out now, given that he's kind of digging in his heels, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And there's so many ways of doing it. I mean, you could leak the Hur tape. That would be one way of doing it. And then, it would show him just to be very senile. The tape that Special Counsel Robert Hur reported, of which he then later said that Biden was an elderly man with a poor memory, that he couldn't be convicted by a jury because the jury would have a reasonable doubt about his kind of mental awareness of stuff, that basically, in a nutshell, too senile to be prosecuted. That's what Robert Hur said. So if we get that tape, that would be great. But are they going to go that way? Are they going to go Burisma, Ukraine, China, corruption? I mean, there's so many triggers they can pull, but they don't want to pull any of those triggers because it will make them look really bad. Like the Robert Hur tape it was recorded many months ago. It will make them look so bad because, well, you hung on to this guy. Robert Hur told you 5-6 months ago that this guy's senile, and you still went with him. So that's bad. Corruption is bad. You don't want to remind people of all the Biden corruption. So there are plenty of triggers which would work immediately. You would just be gone. But they don't want to pull those triggers.
Yeah, I said a couple weeks back that you should watch the intelligence community to see what they're doing, what messages they might be sending, as kind of a way to decipher what's actually going on and if Biden's going to stay or be gone. And I think we've seen those messages being sent. And I think that same analogy holds true for watching for any leaks. The Hur tape is maybe one way to do it, but boy, it's got to be really, really awful. There's got to be, and maybe there's got to be some catastrophic moments in that tape. Otherwise, you've already got his debate performance. So the bar is set pretty high in terms of how terrible it has to be. So unless there's something really, really awful in the Hur tapes, I don't think that's going to be, it's just going to be adding to what we already know. Everybody's just going to be whatever. I don't know that it adds that much. So I would think that you probably want to be watching for leaks. And I agree with you, they're problematic because it's a balancing act, right? There's that balance being to be walked between condemning yourself and condemning Biden. But I still think that there can be incremental leaks that are going to come out. And what they're going to be is they're not going to be designed for the American public. They're going to be direct messages to Joe Biden. Okay, if you really want to go this route, we're going to start. and here's the warning shot over the bow. So I would guess that they might be sort of subtle at first, because again, I would perceive them as being less messages directed at at the American public than they are messages directed at the Biden family, letting them, even if not Joe himself, the rest of the Biden family, letting them know, hey, if we can take you down if we want to.
Right, and they're going to turn up the heat incrementally. So the leaks we've already had is that he has these. He doesn't only have cards which say that this is the reporter and this is going to be the question, and so we've already had those. The new one is that he has these little cards that have photos of the path that he walks to the podium, and not only at some event like some rally or whatever. I don't even call it that, because he kind of tends to go to these high school gyms in front of 100 people or whatever. But for those, he has the photos. But he even has the photos for just some private event at some dude's house or whatever, where it's just fundraising, right? So they go in there a few days earlier and they take photos of the path that he has to walk to wherever he has to say a few words. And then they give it to him on this kind of memory card so that he can see, okay, this is what I have to do. I mean, just unthinkable that the guy is in such a vegetative state that he needs that, right? But someone leaked it. So I agree with you. There's going to be more of this stuff, and then it's going to get incrementally worse and worse.
Well, there was another leak, and it's one that's going to hamstring Joe Biden. And that was the leak from, I think it was a radio interview person, who said that she'd been given all of the questions, was given 8 questions by the Biden White House that she could ask, and she could take 4 of them, and she selected 4. And those were the questions that she could be asked. And that she leaked that, and out with that came, well, this is a regular practice. And in response to that, the Biden White House was forced to say, well, we're not going to do this anymore, which means if they're being honest, they probably aren't, but if they're being honest, they're going to leave Joe Biden unscripted. And I felt like that was that was a moment that was overlooked by a lot of people, that they weren't paying enough attention to what was actually happening. It was another, that was intentional, and that was meant to hamstring, not only make Joe look bad, but to hamstring him, to take away a very important tool and make everybody aware that this was actually happening. So I saw that as a signal.
I agree with you. He obviously didn't, or his people did not send MSNBC's breakfast show any questions, because he got very angry. They asked him about whether he'd taken any sort of cognitive tests or whatever, and he just got angry and started shouting and so on. What they did in that case with that interview was they gave him a script. He even mentioned at some point he has to read something. You can hear kind of on the audio that he's flipping through some pages. So the new scheme is put him on these shows. By the way, always radio or just audio only, because then you don't see him reading and flipping and so on. But he couldn't even handle that. So I agree with you. That's another big one, because there's an endless reservoir of so-called journalists, stenographers who've been fed questions, and all you need is more of them to come forward and say, no, me too. But I want to ask
the press, I think it's important to note, we talked about how the press wasn't friendly, right? Even if they are still getting those questions, they're not going to abide by them anymore.
And this is so important. That's right. And this is so important in terms of the what happened on CNN after the debate. The knives were out. And that was kind of a signal to all the other stenographers. Yep, you can go after him now. And then, of course, Bernstein, you already mentioned, he came on, I think it was CNN as well, like the day after the debate or so, and he put the knife in as well. And then they really knew, okay, it's good, we can go, we're good to go here. So, they obviously got the signal. But I was going to ask you something, because remember back in February when the Hur report came out? Mm-hmm. We were, and he said that Biden was too senile to be prosecuted. I mean, it literally said that. I remember we talked about that, and we both agreed that this wasn't happenstance. This wasn't, Hur wasn't sort of freelancing or whatever. There was some planning behind that. Like, Hur would not have come out with such a strongly worded report had it not been green-lighted somewhere. And it was that sort of shot across the bow, and the Bidens didn't take a hint.
I kind of thought that was, and I agree with you completely, that, because we talked about it at the time and thought, hey, there's no way that Hur, as a member of Biden's DOJ is going to say what he said. Like, legally, he can say it. And it was important to note that the DOJ backed him up, if you remember, and saying that, hey, there's nothing wrong with what he published, what he put out publicly. We reviewed it. I looked at that and I thought that was an insurance policy. And an insurance policy recognizing that, hey, things are starting to get really bad and we may need to push Biden out. So we want to have this. Let's get it out in the public domain. So if we need to put that tape out there, we can do it. So I saw that as a pre-planned coup, if you will.
There was
kind
an
of getting
argument
that
at the
insurance
time.
policy out in the public realm.
There was the first sort of cracks certainly were evident back then, because remember that the White House was trying behind the scenes to stop this report from being published, and then they went in and edited the report and said, we don't want this, and so on. Because whether the report comes out or not is a decision of Merrick Garland or, well, not really, Lisa Monaco, whoever actually runs DOJ.
Yeah.
So
Lisa.
it's not like Robert Hur could write this stuff and just kind of post it on the internet. No, I mean, it has to go through DOJ, and then they decide whether to put it out or not. Remember, there was this huge hoo-ha about whether Barr could publish the fraudulent Mueller report. I mean, same kind of thing. And so in this case, they went through those motions, and as you say, DOJ was like totally fine with it. Yeah, we can keep that all in. It's good. And at the same time, Biden's handlers were pushing back really hard. So you could certainly see the cracks back then.
Yep. And again, my best guess is that was an insurance policy with a recognition that Biden is getting increasingly worse. And everybody's got to remember, of course they do, but we're not just talking about this race. We're talking about, what's it going to be like in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And you just can't see, this only seems to be accelerating. And so I think there was a recognition of that. And if I had to guess, that's why that happened. I think it's also important that we don't let the media off the hook for the bullshit that they've played on everybody. They're trying to have it both ways. They clearly got their marching orders. The media went hand in hand, en masse, from being behind Biden and that everything we were saying about him was a lie to suddenly being all together over here, that Biden senile, he has to go out, and the Biden White House hid everything from us. So, there's a message there as well, because again, we used that word isolative earlier. Well, that's the entirety of the media pointing a finger back at effectively at Joe Biden and Joe Biden, along with his advisors, his aides, his top people, and now saying it's all your fault. Now, of course it wasn't. Everybody in the media knew this. Nobody was surprised by this. They may have been surprised by the magnitude of it at the debate, but they didn't see anything that they didn't already know. So now they're trying to absolve themselves for all their complicity and just carrying on this lie to the American public. But they're also trying to blame the Biden White House and make them the scapegoats, which is an interesting thing to do, because how do you do that without shooting Kamala in the process?
Well, that's right. Absolutely, do not let them off the hook. But what I think some people are kind of over egging the point a bit with what's going on. Not understanding that I'm talking about the Trump side, that it's not going to be helpful to Trump to pour gas on that particular fire. No, even if it goes the way we just discussed that we think it's going to go. Just let them do their thing on their own. When your enemy is self-destructing, just let them be. Which, by the way, is one thing that Trump has done, amazingly well. So I think your idea of focusing on the media is actually perfect. Let the Democrats kind of self-immolate, and in the meantime, just kind of focus on the media and what they did. And I think the pushback has been pretty strong. I mean, certainly in our little corner of Twitter, none of these people are getting away with their tweets like Stelter and all the usual suspects about, this was just, we were all surprised, we were all duped, and so on. That's not working anymore.
It was very interesting to me with Stelter in particular, because he came out with an article explaining, he was commissioned to do it, and clearly he's auditioning for a job back in corporate media, and came out with an article explaining, why the media wasn't actually to blame for this. And I went after him for it, and he responded to me, and I responded back, and then he went away. Now, what's telling about that is he got, just in that short exchange, he was decimated. There was virtually no response. It was all negative to his tweets. No likes, no retweets, just a stream of comments under both of his tweets. So the disparity just showed that it wasn't just, like me making noise. It was all of his entire audience jumping on board with, screw you, Stelter, we don't believe you, you lied to us. And so that was a sea change, that it wasn't just kind of the right, taking that side, but it was the left feeling betrayed and going after him and calling him out for it. That's new.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's been very little support for the media in any of this, which is remarkable and which is good. Obviously, every little helps. The fact that these so-called reporters had to admit not only getting the questions in advance, but then using those questions, that didn't help. No one's defending those people. So yeah, I think we just focus on that. That's a very target-rich environment. There's a lot to be done there. It's a public service, because the more the media is exposed and embarrassed, I know this is a parallel track. This is separate from what happens with Biden and Kamala and whatever. But I think it's almost equally important to focus on that, because it's a public service. The more the media is damaged by all this, the better for all of us. Because without the media, let's just call a spade here. The world would look very, very different right now. Without the media, the whole Russia hoax wouldn't have been what it became. Without the media, the whole Ukraine hoax wouldn't have been what it became, and on and on and on. Without the media, people would have been allowed to ask questions about 2020. You could just go through the whole, we could go on for hours and hours here of examples where the media caused untold damage. So any damage that the media suffers from this is good.
Yeah, and again, I think that's kind of an underreported story in its own right. And what I mean by that, there's sort of two responses from the left to the media right now. And one is outrage over the fact that you lied to us. We're seeing a lot of that. This is nonsense, you knew. And the other response we're seeing from the left is anger at the media for targeting Biden. So there's kind of the left seems to have fallen into two camps at this point. Either we hate you for lying to us, you lied to us, we don't believe you, or you guys are pathetic for going after Biden now and screw you. So they kind of fall into one of those two buckets, sometimes both. But the net effect is this is a huge momentous event in terms of breaking down the media's credibility once and for all. It's been getting increasingly eroded. It's obviously the right is just gone and hasn't believed the media forever. But the left has clung on, and that's given the media their power. And I've never seen such a revolt against the media as we've witnessed in the last 2 weeks. And because of all the noise surrounding Biden, I don't think that's necessarily getting enough attention, that the media is being torn down in front of our eyes. And it's kind of a struggle for me to see those people turning around a couple weeks from now and cheering them. Now, maybe they will, just, they've got a band together over Kamala, what have you. But I still think that there's an erosion, just a destruction of their faith in the media that can't be undone. And that's going to have long-lasting repercussions here.
It will. And the only way the media can redeem itself with those people anyway, or just even a little bit, is if this plays out one way. And that is that we finally hear from Biden that, his health is not good, and, he's not sure whether he can make it until 2028, 2029, in fact. And he's therefore decided he can certainly make it till 2025. Obviously, he's still fine and so on, but long term and so on. And this is all new, and didn't realize and so on. And therefore, he'll pass to Kamala, not the presidency, but being the nominee, which is what I think is the most likely way this plays out. But that also is hugely beneficial to the media, because then they can go back to their narrative of well, we didn't know, this was all completely new to us, but it had the right outcome because Biden did the right thing, and a new generation and so on. So obviously it wouldn't have any effect on our corner, on us, and on people who've seen through all these hoaxes. But yeah. If they want to redeem anything at all, that's the way it's got to play out. If Biden is suddenly gone altogether, it's going to be much harder for them to build up that narrative. If Biden stays, that's also not good for them, because they've now decided that he has to go. So anyway, I think that's the most likely, because it's sort of the best outcome for all sides, including Biden, because he gets to hold on for a few more months.
I was looking down because I was looking at a tweet that was sent by Chuck Todd, and ties directly into your tweet. You're picking out that elites comment. And Chuck Todd responded and said, Biden's anger at elites is a bit misplaced. Without the elites, he would have had a serious primary foe. Without the elites, the no labels effort would have a compelling ticket. Arguably, it's the elites who put too much faith in Biden that got Dems in this position. And that's hilarious on a number of factors. One, he's kind of saying the quiet part out loud, but he's also acknowledging the power that they had there and why they, that if anything, they stuck with him for too long. So it's kind of glorious to see these kinds of things come forth, both admissions and, kind of reshaping the way you're looking at this stuff. So many people don't realize, we just don't have true, fair elections in my mind. Everything is shaped and sculpted, and that's beginning to be seen.
Right, but we're very, very far away from any resolution of these problems in terms of, if we broaden it out here and talk about elections in general, because I think if they hold on to Biden, Biden's going to lose, because all their efforts, all their harvesting, all their mail-in, all their whatever, they've got planned isn't going to be enough because of, everything we really talked about.
Yep.
Conversely, I think if they replace Biden, the new narrative will be so overwhelming, so strong, and the media will push it so much that they'll win. So that's my prediction at this point. But should they win? And then we get to this broader issue of elections aren't fair. And you see, I don't want to, digress here too much, but you see it with the France elections. You see it with the UK elections. You see it, in every so-called Western democracy. The election system is built in a way or gamed in a way. The US election system isn't built that way, but it's gamed that way. And in Europe, it's actually built that way. For instance, the French one. And by that way, I mean in a way that always ensures that the elites will always hold on to power. That's the whole point of it. So, for instance, in France, again, I don't want to digress here too far, but they have 2 rounds of elections in order to get rid of the anti-establishment, anti-elite vote. So in the round 1, the anti-establishment won big time. And then in round 2, all the other people who don't even fit together enter these coalitions where you drop here, I drop there, you run there. They gamed the whole thing to suppress the anti-establishment. And lo and behold, the establishment won the second round, which always seems to be the case in France. Every time they have a presidential election, every time they have a parliamentary election, it's always the same. Round 1 is like, oh my God, the anti-establishment wins. And then 2 weeks later, it's a reversal. UK, they have got this very similar system where Nigel Farage, I would say like the most credible anti-establishment person probably in all of politics, and I would include Trump in that, just because he's been so consistent for so many decades. The guy started as a financial analyst, and then he was just so upset with Europe and the whole system that he decided to go into politics, and he just carried it through. So he got 4 million votes, but he only got 4 or 5 seats in a 600-seat parliament. Whereas these liberal Democrats, that's the name of the party, they got 3-point-something million votes, and they got 70-something seats because of the way the system is designed. So I know I kind of wandered off here a bit, but that is long after Biden is gone, we're still going to struggle with that aspect of it, that the systems are either gamed or designed in a way that the establishment always, gets to hold on to power.
Well, and there's also a good lesson there in that, they never give up. And you get, like France was kind of whipsawed. There was all this elation and despair. And then in a week, it's all reversed completely. And, I've wondered a little bit if Dems have maybe started to wonder about abdicating this round. And I still wonder that because there's probably a financial crisis coming, a major downturn. There's a lot of bad things that can happen. They're not sure what to do. But that's a good reminder that they will fight to the bitter end. They'll always pursue multiple fronts. They'll always have Plan B in place. And speaking of Plan B, we know that they also are concurrently, cementing already long-laid plans for what to do if Trump gets another term in office. So, they're pursuing those parallel tracks where they're implementing all kinds of processes and procedures whereby they can hamstring the Trump administration while they unleash all of their various riot elements. And we know that's happening, and they're going after the Insurrection Act. We've talked about that before. But just a good reminder that they're never going to give up, and it's always what you don't know that hurts you. And you and I think actually we're talking about this just before we jumped on, that there's a lot of elation out there right now in kind of Trump world. And yeah, I'm part of it. I'm enjoying things. But that reminder that, hey, don't get too excited, because just because everything feels like it's going great right now, again, it's what you don't know that hurts you, and they will always find a way. So be prepared. There's more coming. It's just a matter of when it's coming.
I fully agree. And as you mentioned, you know that because we already talked about this offline. But I would add a few things which are, I think on this show, like probably a month or two ago, we talked about the October surprise, which may or may not be in October. It may be in September. The October surprise doesn't necessarily have to be in October anymore. But they've got something planned. There's no question whatsoever that they've got something planned. And that was even before the whole Biden senility was exposed overwhelmingly in that debate.
Well, let's go back to the her. If you accept our premise that the release of the her's comments, which were incredibly damaging, that if you agree that that was some sort of pre-planning, right there, that tells you that they were already had things well in motion, long before that, because that had to be set up as well. So, it's indicative.
That's correct. But I think at that time there was perhaps still, I don't think there was the plan was decided. I mean, it was obviously, as you mentioned earlier, it was an insurance policy.
But there's a difference between decided and implemented, right? You can still run the parallel implementation. You just don't know if you're going to pull the final trigger on it. All I'm saying is it's important to think that Dems are probably not reacting just from the point of the debate or the last couple of weeks, but rather they've been putting something in place for a while, and unnervingly, we don't know what that is.
Exactly right. And I think there's these two tracks. There's the Biden track, which includes her, which includes leaks, which includes other things in terms of it started off as an insurance policy. Now it's become more of a get him out. But then there's the Trump track. And we haven't talked about that, not on this show, but we've talked about it before. And we don't know what it is. But there is going to be stuff on the Trump track. There's going to be a new Access Hollywood tape or, whatever. I mean, I don't think that's going to fly anymore. In 2016, that just about flew. But even back then, it didn't fly as much as in 2012, it would have killed any candidate. In 2008, whatever. So we're progressing to the point where these things kind of matter less. But Democrats aren't stupid. They've got something else. We don't know what that is. So, and that's aside from what happens with Biden. I think in and of itself, anointing Kamala and then having the media do this huge coronation about how she's the best thing ever and the hope and change we need and so on is going to give them quite a boost. And if you then add into that whatever the October surprise is, again, I completely agree with you. There is the result in November is no foregone conclusion whatsoever. I mean, just absolutely, I would not get into any celebratory mode whatsoever. At best, even from today's point of view, it's maybe 50-50.
Yeah, I think that if Kamala joins, like let's say that we get this resolved and Kamala enters, I would guess that there's going to be a short-term euphoria where people are going to be so relieved to have the Biden problem resolved that they just rally behind Kamala no matter what. Right. And then it becomes kind of crucial as to how can Kamala handle herself? Can she be short-term trainable? I was told by a lot of people who are very well placed that early in the Biden administration, she'd been sent off and they tried to kind of run through and train her and get her geared up to ultimately take over for Biden. And the conclusion they came to pretty quickly while they were trying to do that was it's impossible. We can't do it. And that was why she was sidelined from then on, and you rarely ever saw her. So I question if she can carry that. But by the same token, compared to what we've been seeing from Biden, I guess we've already had this kind of bar lowered so far down that maybe a bad Kamala still kind of sounds okay by comparison to a doddering Joe Biden who's become a comedy feed.
I'm very certain of that. The media was able to cover up COVID origins for 4 years just by putting out a fake narrative. They were able to cover up the Russia collusion thing for 3-4 years, perhaps even longer. they're going to be able to cover up Kamala's stupidity, even though it's already known. They're going to reinvent her, and they're going to be able to cover it up for what is it going to be, like 4 months or whatever. That's going to be no problem for them whatsoever. I was just thinking while you were saying all that. Obviously, she was chosen because she was sort of an insurance policy for Biden in itself. I mean, I don't think they realized how dumb she is, but she was pretty dumb. I mean, that was kind of known all along. And in that way, that's good for Biden because, he gets to hold on because she's kind of worse. Only that now he's deteriorated so far that she may no longer be worse, which is so hilarious thinking about it.
The irony.
But just imagine if he had chosen, or not him, his handlers had chosen Susan Rice, who was doing, I think, on the betting markets back in 2020, she was way ahead for a long while. Super smart. I mean, super good we probably policy-wise, we would disagree with her on everything. And implementation, we would disagree with her on everything. And Russia hoax, we would, she was involved with that, when she wrote herself an email just to say that everything was done by the book and so on. I mean, but super, super smart. And imagine if she was there now as vice president and she could be the replacement. They would have done the swap already.
Oh, yeah. I would. If there was a way that they could find the means to get Susan Rice inserted, to become, just by whatever mechanism, to become the candidate, they would fall all over themselves to do that. She checks all the boxes that they need, but she's also whip smart, has the backing, can speak well, has the backing of Obama, knows she'd be, from their perspective, she would probably be the perfect candidate. Black woman, incredibly intelligent, runs, can't stand her, but it's a mistake to, look at our opponents and think that they're idiots, because a lot of these people are absolutely not idiots, and she is not. So she would be formidable. That is something. If there was a way for them to get her in there, they would love to do it. I would think with Kamala, let's say if they go with her, I would look to see nothing but scripted speeches from her. Don't let her go off. Have a very good speech writer, have everything written down on the teleprompter, and take as few questions as possible, presumably none. A concern would be the debate, but Trump can sound kind of, he's Trump when he debates. So maybe that actually helps her in that case. Who knows? But I would think you'd see a rehabilitation effort, get her to speak, but do it only on a scripted basis.
It's Biden has set the bar so low that she might be able to exceed it. I mean, Mike Pence easily won the debate back in 2020 against her. That was the one with the fly on the head.
Yeah.
But the fly used up all the oxygen, as anyone talked about, which was only possible because she didn't flub. I mean, if you listen to what she said, it was just kind of airheadedness. It was just bromides. It was just platitudes, stuff they'd put in her head. Like, here are like 3 or 4 sentences, just learn them by heart and just randomly spit them out. And that's basically what she did. But it wasn't so transparently stupid that anyone if you'd listened closely, if you'd written it down and read it as a script, you would have probably thought, oh, this is terrible. But it came across as sort of, okay, well, she's talking about something, it sounds sort of halfway intelligible, okay, whatever. And if she does that, she'll be fine. Interviews will only be done with people who have already who are going to help them, who want to help her. So all of that is going to, that's all going to be organized by the media. So they're going to, carry her over the finish line. The question then is, who's the vice president? That's another thing where she can really kind of juice the whole thing and create, a huge excitement and whatever. I mean, imagine it's like Michelle Obama, Harris Obama. It has kind of a ring to it, doesn't it? That would be probably not beatable. And I hate to say this, but, that's I think where things stand.
Yeah, there's a whole host that she could go with. Harris Rice, who knows? One thing before we end here that I was kind of running through my head, boy, would I love to have true insight in what Kamala is doing right now on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. Where is she? Who's she meeting with? What's going on? Because if we could decipher that, that would probably tell us everything about where we're headed, in the near term here. I got to imagine that she's actively meeting with everybody under the sun whose last name isn't Biden or who isn't with the Biden administration.
I think she's probably just parked in a room somewhere watching cartoons, but the people behind her are doing all the things you mentioned, and the
Oh,
planning
I
of
would guess that she's getting prepped right now, that there's
yeah, maybe I
active
was
work going on.
yeah, no, good point. I mean, but just in a very cartoonish way, like Kamala, here are 4 sentences, learn them by heart because you will have to use them very often in the next
Just
few weeks.
they
It
want to
should
break
be
her of her catchphrases and they want to break her of her cackle.
exactly. Well, the cackling is going to be very hard to overcome because they already tried and they haven't been able to overcome that.
Right.
But yeah, maybe a bit more training and so on. So no, I do agree with you. Maybe she's not watching cartoons. Maybe she's just she's in a room somewhere being trained really hard. Train. But
They
the
need
real
her to
action,
look presentable. That's what they need.
right? The real action is going on somewhere with. I mean, look at Mark Elias, right? He used to when they got rid of him, but he used to be a Kamala lawyer. And of course, he was the whole brains behind the whole Russiagate scam and many, many other things to do with Democrats. So then he was sidelined.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people forget that he was helping to run Kamala's campaign.
And then he was sidelined, probably because there was this split with the Biden people or whatever. And we never figured out exactly what happened there. But I'm sure he's back on board in some way, pulling some strings.
Yeah. Yeah, because he got sidelined. It also coincided with a lot of the releases out of Durham that related to his partner and all the bad news. So, it's possible Perkins Coie just decided to cut ties with them over that, but it always felt like there was something more, and maybe that's the area. But yeah, he's trying to get back in. So I guess with that, it's going to be, it's going to be an eventful week. And guess what? The week after, it's going to be an eventful week. It's some crazy times that we are living in right now.